We're starting. Thank you so much for playing Prince. That just kind of sets the mood, playing old school. As you can see, this is a food side chat instead of fireside chat, food side chat. And we're going to be talking about nostalgic flavors and formulating them for healthier, sustainable future. So, good afternoon. I'm Nadasha Townsend. I'm the content director for Supply Side Food and Beverage Journal. We just changed, so I have to remember not to say insider. So I apologize. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart: the power of nostalgia in food. We've all had those moments, a whiff of a certain scent, a taste of a familiar flavor, and suddenly we're transported back to a simpler time. It's a powerful emotion and one that food manufacturers have long tapped into. But today, we're focusing on the progression of nostalgia. We're not just looking to evoke memories, we're aiming to revolutionize them. We're exploring how to take beloved, often less healthy food and beverage products and transform them into healthier, sustainable options without sacrificing that nostalgic appeal. In the next 45 minutes, we'll delve into the science of nostalgia, discuss the latest trends in sustainable and functional ingredients, and explore strategies for reformulating classic recipes. We'll also touch on the importance of transparent labeling and consumer education. So let's embark on this culinary journey together. Let's rediscover the past, reimagine the future, and create a world where nostalgia and nutrition can coexist. Joining me today are Clara Pay. She is a founder of Unite Foods. Inspired by her gluten intolerance diagnosis, Clara founded Unite, a protein bar company celebrated for diverse global flavors like churro and baklava. And we also have Devin Golem, VP of Science and Innovation for Step Change Innovations. Golem's career has touched on product development, application sales, technical sales, and technical writing at companies like ranging from Kellogg's to Roquette. Her expertise includes gut health ingredients, fibers, and proteins. Let's give Clara and Devin a warm welcome. So first, as always, let's talk a little bit more just about your experience in product development. I know that Clara, you have this one product, and but I want to talk about how you got into the industry as a result.
So I'm a first time food founder. I didn't literally was just a home cook and didn't know anything about food. Was diagnosed with a gluten intolerance and went on a quest to find diet compliant food. And one of the things that I learned is in working with a nutritionist was that I should eat protein bars. And I never really ate protein bars before that, but they were a way for me to get the protein I needed and not the gluten and a quick lunch, so to speak. And so food became very functional and it became food I had to eat, not food I wanted to eat. And so all the time I would go to the grocery store and look at the shelves and try to figure out like which protein bar could I find that maybe would taste better than the one I had today, and was just going through so many brands. And one day I had an epiphany that like, oh my god, they're always the same flavor. It didn't matter which protein brand I chose. It was either vanilla or chocolate or peanut butter or chocolate or vanilla peanut butter. Like it was just those same flavors on repeat. And I don't want to make it too long-winded, but I'm, also an immigrant. I was born in the Sudan in Africa, and none of the flavors on shelf resonated with me, and they were not nostalgic to me. So how I got started was literally busted out a Cuisinart, went to Trader Joe's, and thought to myself, what would I put in a protein bar if I were to make it for my own family? And then I visited cultural supermarkets in my neighborhoods and looked at flavors that people already existed in different cultures and just started iterating and probably made 20 different flavors and tested them on my friends.
Fantastic. Devin?
Yeah, so I came more from the academic side of things. My bachelor's degree is in chemistry, and I had two internship opportunities when I was in college, either work for a pharmaceutical company or work for Kellogg's. You can figure out from the kind intro you gave me which one I picked. I went the food route because it allowed me to use both my science brain and my art brain. Pharmaceuticals, it takes 20 years for a new drug to come out, and you never know if it's actually going to make it or not, and you have millions of regulatory loopholes. But food, it's so much more creative. There's there it incorporates a lot of different aspects that I enjoy, but also there's a lot of science to it. So I worked at Kellogg's for a couple of years while I finished my degree, went to grad school for food science, and the rest is history. And I remain an academic at heart, but I also know that we're all here to make money in the industry somehow. So I try to marry the two by communicating science in a way that people understand, using ingredients to help better ourselves and help make the world a little better, and still have some fun on the side.
Thank you. So Clara gave us a little preview of some of her favorite nostalgic flavors. Talk a little bit about yours and how you've used them in applications.
Sure. So chocolate and is always a big nostalgic flavor for me. Chocolate chip cookies. I like to use a lot of vanilla and cinnamon in different formulations because they're great flavors that couple with so many different things. But like a warm apple cinnamon pie, or vanilla as a flavor potentiator, for enhancing chocolate flavors. I think those pair nicely with just about anything. But like even putting chocolate and cinnamon together, that might not exactly be nostalgic for me, but personally, but it taps into a global market like Mexican hot chocolate, for instance. And the trends in the industry are very much going more global with ingredients. So you can take a little bit of the old and pair it with something new, and still tap into that nostalgia, but broaden our horizons at the same time.
Speaking of Mexican hot chocolate, I know that's one of the flavors for one of your protein bars. Can you talk about the reaction that you got when you first did that? People were like, "Really, Mexican hot chocolate in a bar?" Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making things that I thought tasted good. And, I think one of the ones that was like the epiphany was churro. So I am from Orange County, California. I have two young girls. I was at Disneyland way more times than I care to admit, being annual pass holders. And I would see the churro cart always had a long line, right? Always had a long line. And people loved churros. And I loved churros. And I think a lot of people loved churros growing up. And it's a Hispanic flavor. It's from Spain and Portugal, but it's also eaten in many other Hispanic countries and like county fairs. And Taco Bell has cinnamon twists, right? So it wasn't so obscure, but Mexican hot chocolate was, and Mexican hot chocolate was like a little bit different. Like you're gonna put a little spice in the chocolate, and I didn't know if it would work, but then I won a Sophie Award from the Specialty Food Association right away, and I was like, okay, well, I
We
made it
don't
in my
say that
kitchen.
here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. And it was a big like boost to me because I was just a formulator in my home. Like I didn't have an R&D team. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have a staff of people. It was just it was simple ingredients put together in an authentic way.
Um, how often are you called on to develop products with nostalgic ingredients? Do you get nostalgic flavors? Are you and when someone comes to you, you're like, that might not work in this particular application. Maybe that. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So obviously we're here at Supply Side West, which is more supplement oriented, although food is very important. But more and more we're seeing that bridge close between functional foods and supplements. So a lot of the same actives that we see in supplements are coming into food. So that's where flavor is important because you may have some crazy off flavors you need to mask. And I've encountered a lot of actives that maybe are better masked by like a chai or cinnamon or tea or something like that. Things with a very earthy flavor aren't going to pair with a fruit flavor, for instance. So it's really keeping in mind, what the base is that you're working with and then going from there. So, there are plenty of things that aren't possible, but, thanks to a lot of flavor maskers and how technology has improved in the flavor industry, there are a lot of things that are possible.
We talked a little bit earlier about, there are some traditional brands and they change the formulation or they introduce a new flavor that customers may not like. And I'm not going to get, I'm not trying to bust anybody out or anything like that, but What do you think about that, and how can they overcome something like that when they suddenly change it? People sometimes just don't like change. So, can you talk about that a little bit and how they can overcome that?
Sure. So, a lot of the products that we see with crazy flavors, they're like what the industry calls in and outs. Like they're temporary. They're on the market more to go with a holiday or some sort of season or things like that. Like we're firmly in PSL season right now, right? Pumpkin everywhere, which I personally love. So I'm not going to
Well,
complain
that's
there.
all right.
That's all right. Hey, Starbucks, you get a shout out there. Um, but you think of things that you ate when you were younger, but then now as a food scientist, I know that your taste buds actually change every 3 weeks, which is really handy. Like if you're wanting to like cut sugar out of your diet and switch to diet pop, like just give it 3 weeks and then you're probably going to be okay. Um, but just keeping in mind that products may stay the same and we may change over time and those flavors may taste different to us now older versus when we were younger, but of course formulations are going to change over time because we're all in this industry, right? Companies constantly buy each other. Some ingredients are trendy, some are not, some are hard to make anymore. We've got sustainability issues, or maybe we can't make something we once did. So that's going to be a reason behind the formulation, reformulation, and changes. Companies are always going to try to, unless they're very targeted and really going after a special market segment, they will try to make food is appealing to as many people as possible because that's what you want to do to sell more product. So, constantly, utilizing sensory panels, working with flavor houses to try to keep things similar, but also understanding that, our palates are changing over time. Um, and we may create something, we may crave something similar to what we used to like you were talking about Hershey's and Twizzlers and things like that. Like they may be too sweet to us now that we're older, but there's things that we can do with sugar reduction or things that we can do with salt reduction to still tap into that nostalgia but make it a little better for you.
Yes. So, we were talking about that earlier, and the issue with that, though, is that, for instance, like I use a Fruity Pebbles example, and you know exactly what that tastes like. It has a certain flavor profile, and you try to recreate that in some things, and it may not taste exactly like that. And someone makes that, and then the customers they try it. They're like, "What is this?" So how do you fix something like that? As well as we talked about that sugar reduction thing, like, oh my God, I really loved this when I was a kid, but now I'm an adult. I still want it, but I don't want it that sweet. So I just feel like it goes to gamut. Gamut.
Yeah. No, there's the fun thing about food science is that there are so many different ingredients in our toolbox that we can use um, to change products and make them better for you, as opposed to how fatty and sugary they were when we were younger. I find in a lot of my work that people are wanting things that are less sweet than they were before. Like you see dark chocolate being much more huge right now as opposed to milk chocolate or sweetened chocolate. So I think that's kind of an example of how our palates are changing over time. That we're wanting things that are less sweet. But if you're trying to formulate something that tastes like Fruity Pebbles, for instance, if you're trying to recreate that flavor in a different matrix, you have to keep in mind, what did that matrix taste like in the first place? Are there things that you need to overcome? Do you need to change the sugar, the salt? Are you trying to target for maybe higher protein, like your bars, for instance, or higher fiber content? Also, keeping in mind fat content, because fat does provide a lot of flavor. There are a lot of flavors that are fat soluble. So having fat content, and also fat's an interesting ingredient because it provides flavor, but it also provides a lot of texture and mouthfeel. Sometimes the texture is going to change or modulate how we might perceive flavor as well.
Awesome. Clara, in a sense, you're serving an underserved community with your different flavors, because I've never seen any protein bar that's in baklava or churro, and definitely not Mexican hot chocolate. So, how did you do the research to come up with those flavors exactly?
Well, if you were my friend in 2018, you'd know exactly. I literally just, like I said, I went to cultural supermarkets, I went to Hispanic supermarkets, Asian supermarkets. I just paid attention to what was going on around me. And I am my own target market, right? I am an immigrant. I was looking for a flavor that represented kind of, something different. And when I looked at US Census data, half the US population is like me. Half the US population is from somewhere else and growing. And it's a $4 trillion market opportunity, right? And I had a hard time finding a co-man at the very beginning. They were like, what? Why doesn't she want to make vanilla? And I was like, that's the point. I don't want to make vanilla. And if it hadn't been for one food scientist, an Asian lady, who was like, no, I get it. I want to work on it. I want to do this. I get what she's doing. I don't think we would have had our first co-man. So it took, you know, people don't formulate the same because they're blind. It's just that's what sells, and they just want to sell more of what sells. And it takes an outsider, literally, somebody not from the food industry, somebody who is from a diverse background, to say, well, what about this? And then after we launched, everyone's like, oh, how did you know global flavors would trend? Do you have a crystal ball? How did you know? I was like, I don't know. It was my lived experience. So I think authenticity in flavor development is underutilized and underrepresented. And there's people that get in trouble for like cultural appropriation, right, of flavor if it's not done authentically and with the right stakeholders. And so, I mean, it's a difficult thing, and nostalgia, is different for everybody. Region by region, country by country, like everything is different.
How did you source for the ingredients for your products?
Trader Joe's was like the formulation. So I was like, what would I put in my bar? I'd put almond butter and dates and hemp seeds and whatever else, cinnamon, vanilla. And then when I went to a co-man, they sourced all the ingredients, thank God, because I didn't know how to do any of that. So it was a turnkey product for me.
What are some of the most popular and nostalgic flavor profiles that can be reformulated for a healthier, sustainable future?
Yikes. No pressure at all. I mean, chocolate and vanilla are universal and they're everywhere. Um, and like I said earlier, we can add things to them to give them a more global appeal. I think there's certain fruit flavors that evoke some nostalgia, like having icy pops or, things like that when you're a kid, or, apple pie or peach pie or cherry cobbler. Yeah, I'm making myself hungry talking about this. Um, those, a lot of those flavors, especially like the chocolate and vanilla, I mean, I know they're basic flavors, but you can use those to, overcome a lot of obstacles that you might hit with your ingredients, especially if you're trying to make something more healthy. But there's science. We can do so many things now. And there really are so many great flavor masking and flavor modulating options out there, which are actually important. I know I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit on the sustainability thing, but if you think of cocoa, we're starting to have some sustainability issues there. But there are flavor companies that have ingredients that can make that cocoa taste go farther without having to use 100% of the cocoa that you had in the first place. So looking at things like that can help as well.
You touched a little bit on texture, and I want to talk to you both about that because your bars are very moist. Some people say moist is not a good word, but it's great to have in certain products. So I want you to talk about the moistness of your product, and you talk about the texture and how important it is to have that texture in these types of products because that has something to do with the sensory element.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's all about sensory. So it has to smell, somewhat look like, taste like, and you can't just formulate different things just to be different. Then you end up with eat a chicken tikka masala bar. Like, you're not. Like, it's not just weird to be weird. It's just, it has to be a sensory. Like when I was developing baklava, I grew up eating baklava. Baklava is like dense and chewy and moist, and honey oozes out and the walnuts. And that was like hard to do and hard to like figure out, but it was worth it to push through and not have like another dry, crumbly bar. And like, there had never been a baklava anything outside of baklava when I formulated that. There's no baklava ice cream or baklava popcorn or baklava potato chips. It was really the first product that was, different, trying to represent something, and it became a bestseller. And that was like a big surprise to me because how many people eat baklava?
No, I love that. I think chicken tikka masala would be a great flavor for like savory mixes, like protein crisps and things like that. Absolutely. I mean, who
Or
doesn't like
jerky.
butter chicken? Come on. Yeah, let's tap into that. Um, you know, there's I fully approve of your use of the word moist because there's nothing worse than a dry protein bar, moist is a technical term, okay? Humectancy, if you really want to get technical about it in the food science world. Humectants are, substances, sugar and salt are two prime examples that absorb water. But there's plenty of other ones out there as well. So if you can use, a humectant, in your product with all this protein that could make it more drying, that's going to help with the texture. You want a texture that's appealing, especially if you're doing flavors of bars that maybe you think of cookies. I mean, baklava is kind of crunchy, right? But if you're making things that are flavored like churros, that might be a little softer on the inside. I think of elephant ears from carnivals. The same cinnamon sugar seasoning. When I was a kid. Having something that's dry and crumbly is not going to be appealing. So you want to make sure that you're keeping texture into account. On the flip side, like with savory flavors, you might want something that's really crisp. One thing I find about there's a brand of chicken chicken protein crisps out there, and they're actually really tasty, but like protein can get really chewy and gummy in your back teeth over time. So anything that we can do to help enhance that crispness, maybe with starches or fibers, that will help keep that crisp texture that you might associate more with savory flavors.
I have one last thing to ask, and then we can open up to the audience. Just a key takeaway that you have from this session that that you can give to the audience. Just one thing based on this discussion.
Yes. I would say invite your consumers into the process. Like we put on the back of every bar an email address and invite people to submit their own flavors that they would like us to make. And that opens up a great dialogue between, the key stakeholders. Like ask people what they want and try to develop around that. So I think, that listening and being authentic.
My big takeaway would be that good taste and good nutrition don't have to be mutually exclusive. We've touched a lot on different ways that we can make foods healthier for you. And of course, we're kind of an adjunct to the health industry and everything that we do here. But just because, something tastes bad, just because, something might be good for you, you don't have to put up with whatever taste might come with that. There are tools out there to help make things tasty and still make things better, in terms of your macronutrient profile. And it's, I mean, at the end of the day, if something doesn't taste good, people aren't going to buy it. They might try it, they might see like, oh, this is trending, oh, this is fun packaging, great story, but if it tastes like you fill in the blank. I said this on a podcast once, but I won't say it here. People aren't going to eat it, and you can suck people in with great marketing and a great story, but if you don't have good taste to go along with that marketing, people aren't going to buy it at the end of the day unless they are masochists and like to eat nasty food for kicks. So, good taste and good nutrition can work very well together.
You two are hilarious. I mean, give them a round of applause. I mean, they were great. Great stories, great advice. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Cassie? Give Cassie a mic, please.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm curious about this sort of consumer desire to sort of have less in their food, fewer ingredients. Where you talked about, Devin, you were talking about flavor masking, and I say additive, but I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. So can you talk about how you overcome that challenge of like maybe meeting that consumer demand of having fewer ingredients in their food, but also making it taste good? And have you noticed that happening?
There's definitely a trend. processed foods are getting really demonized right now, but I will say that was either JAMA or the New England Medical Journal that they published a study showing that you can still have a healthy diet with processed food. So I don't want to demonize processed food because, I mean, I ate a bag of chips for my lunch today because I had to run to another meeting. It is okay, but there is definitely a trend to go less processed, and that's okay. The one nice thing with like flavor maskers and flavor potentiators, a lot of them actually just fall under the natural flavor labeling. So you can combine a whole, but like you'll see like, spices, natural spices or something like that on an ingredient label. There's so many different ingredients that you can group together on that to make it look like there's less in there, but it's one of those little regulatory hacks, I suppose. But it's a good question.
So that's my question. I develop beverages and a lot of other things, but natural flavors. We're having a lot of our customers who are like, I want to know exactly what's in your natural flavors. I don't want to take your product. I want to do a different product because you have natural flavors. Is that just our very vocal minority, or is that more of a trend?
I don't want to interrupt you if you want to say anything at all. I think consumers are getting more savvy over time. I mean, I'm a food scientist, so I am always interested in what is in everything, and I want to know. I mean, a lot of like your powdered flavors, they're basically 99% maltodextrin, with a carrier and then some other fun things on it. Some consumers want to know exactly what's in there, some don't. I would probably say it's more in the minority of people who want to know exactly what flavor is in there. But if you can also, if you rely on your marketing, I guess, to tell a healthy, naturally sourced, authentic story, I think that might mitigate that as well.
Karen?
Questions for Clara. What kind of protein and how much protein in a bar?
So our protein is from almond butter and whey protein, and between 10 and 11 grams.
Awesome. And then are you able to share anything about like how many, are you looking to keep rolling out flavors? You said you're taking input like, I think these are great. Like make all the flavors, like grow.
Yeah, I do want to make all the flavors. It's just not me. It's not realistic. I'm looking at different form factors. I think we talked about the GLP-1s in the previous session. People are going to want smaller portion sizes, and I think smaller mini bars are going to be kind of like the future of like my iteration process. And so looking at it from that perspective.
Can I ask a question? I'd be curious to hear about your take on collagen. There was a session yesterday I heard where collagen is really having a bit of a resurgence, and it's a popular ingredient for a lot of different reasons. Hair, skin, and nails mostly. Although it's branching out of that. Whey protein is amazing for satiety, and coupling that with the almond as well. But have you thought of looking at protein sources that add other health benefits beyond just providing protein as a macronutrient?
Like anecdotally, like 6 years ago when collagen kind of first came on the scene in beauty and health, and we started to see those first brands pop up, I asked a good friend of mine she has a large am I saying that right? Dermatology practice in Chicago. She sees literally thousands of patients across 8 centers a day. Huge. She's on like the state board in Illinois. And I asked her, if I take this collagen, is it going to be good for my skin and hair and whatever? And she's like, it's not going to survive your gut biome. Like, it's just marketing, right? And I don't know how far it's come. You would know more than I do. But when I formulate with protein sources, I think what is what can the most people benefit from, right? Like people ask me, how come you don't make it vegan? And I was like, because when I was formulating, pea protein tasted like peas, and I didn't want it to taste like peas, and I didn't want to add a lot of additives. I wanted to keep it, kind of simple. And so I think of ingredient choices as being, I try to choose the most diet agnostic. Like almond butter is always going to be good for you. Dates are always going to be good for you, good source of fiber. Whey protein is technically an upcycled product, right? So it's widely available. I mean, not right now, but so, that's how I think about ingredient choices. Natural flavorings, I get that, but it really is a minority of people. If people really cared, would Oreo be the #1 cookie? people don't actually care that much, right? A few people do, and it just depends on your channel strategy. But I think people care about taste, and if you can win them with taste and be mostly better than the other thing, I think that that's enough. Like I have a good friend who sells a brand of chips called the Good Crisp, and it's like a Pringles competitor. It's not a health food, but it's better than Pringles, right? So
Um, we didn't talk about GLP-1s, but this I think would be something that somebody who was on that on
drugs.
one of those drugs
Yeah.
or coming off it, this would be something they may be interested in because, obviously the first thing that goes is your appetite and you're thinking back, of what you really liked. Or it could trigger something. That's the other thing. It could trigger something that you were eating that you shouldn't be eating. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I'm actually on GLP-1 myself. I'm on Ozempic, so I can talk about this from many different angles. Um, you know, for me personally, my appetite's definitely decreased. And my sugar dependency, shall we say, has decreased. I think I ate a lot of sugar to just kind of numb myself, and that was kind of my high. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I eat chocolate. I've talked about chocolate a lot today. um, so, every now and then, I still want something sweet. But, because I'm taking in less food and I ate half of my sandwich from Starbucks this morning for breakfast. I'm just like, I don't feel like the rest and threw it away. So when I'm eating something now, I really want to focus on something that tastes good because I want that, I still, want to get protein and fiber and things like that, but, I want it to matter. So if I'm craving salt, I'm going to have a slice of pizza, and really, look at that. But, there's all sorts of ways we could make pizza healthier. We could reduce the fat and the cheese a little bit. We could, reduce the salt in the meat a little bit or use a plant-based meat, add more fiber and protein in the dough, or like make a cauliflower crust or something like that. There's all sorts of ways that you can, make things like that healthy.
Have something that's pizza flavored, possibly.
Absolutely, like a pizza flavored sun chip, or I mean, there's pizza combos out there, right? But you could even make those combos healthier. I mean, there's the world's our oyster. There's so many different things that we could formulate with. But I think a lot of people on GLP-1s are trying to, especially if they're looking for pre-processed food or like packaged food, they're looking for bars that have protein. They're looking for bars that have fiber, shakes and things like that. I'm a busy mom, so I don't have time to cook a lot of meals. So I'm, looking for something, that already has some good nutrition baked into it. But I also want something that tastes good. But then, there's this flip side, I guess, of GLP-1s where, people are, worried about coming off the drug at some point because, honestly, they're getting used a lot as vanity drugs. Lose like the last 10 pounds or something like that, which they shouldn't be, but I will get off that soapbox. But there's people that are looking for ways to tap into what GLP-1s do, which is basically just, helping with our satiety hormones. There's prebiotic fibers that can help with that. There's other, botanicals and micronutrients that can help with that. So, there's, GLP-1 is all the rage right now, and there's tons of booths out there talking about ingredients that tap into that same system so you can sort of get the effect of GLP-1s without actually taking them. But personally, I will talk about GLP-1s all day long, and I'm having great success on it.
Wonderful. Good for you. That's awesome. Are there any more questions?
My question is for Clara. I just pulled up the site of your bars and really was quickly looking at them. Did you run into any issues when you were formulating where you wanted to kind of keep the integrity of like the product that you created at home, in your Cuisinart, but then when it came time to actually create like a shelf-stable product that you were manufacturing, did you have to kind of compromise on certain things, or were there any flavor profiles that you really had to like be like, I really wanted to do this, but it just didn't make sense from a formulation standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good question. I used really wholesome natural ingredients as the base, so there wasn't too much compromise on that. But I think I didn't know anything about flavor houses when I started, and I was like, I would taste somebody else's bar. I'd be like, how come that tastes exactly like an apple pie? but it only has 5 ingredients. Like, how did they do that, right?
Science.
Right, science. Just my ignorance, right? And it's like it was a factor of like learning how, like, there are tools, there are ways of making things taste closer to what you're intending to do, and that was a big unlock for me. And that was just like really serendipitous. My husband happened to be golfing with a guy that owned a flavor house, and he was like, talk to us, and he did all the flavoring for a major bar company. I was like, oh, will you do mine? And I mean, that's how that worked.
Are there any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Again, Devin and Clara, this was fantastic, and you guys should start a comedy tour. Go on the road with this.
Thank you for having
Yes.
us.
It's
Okay,
wonderful.
thank
Thanks
you.
for all the questions.